IB Nation, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Wednesday, and that means, folks, it is time for the midweek rundown. This is going to be a little bit of a new format moving forward, at least for a little bit. I'm going to be doing this show today solo, and it's going to be that way for a little bit. Obviously, as you all know, Ryan welcomed his second child into the world. She was born on, I think it would be Sunday night, so kind of like early Monday morning. And he's going to be off the next couple weeks, but when he gets back from his 2 weeks off, he's still going to be not as involved in shows as much over the summer as he and his wife kind of help kind of raise that little one a little bit. So he's going to still do the Monday recruiting show. He's still going to be involved in some other shows, but he's just not going to be doing as much. We're going to have Vince on more. Sean Stires and I are going to start doing a show together in the afternoon. Vince and I will be doing the mailbag together. Ryan's going to focus on the written content with recruiting updates. Obviously, that's going to keep him very busy in June and July. So that's going to be a little bit of our shift. Obviously, we talked about Tuesday is going to be sort of our season preview day. Wednesday is going to be the midweek rundown. And I'm just going to take a lot of different topics that kind of come up and try to make them kind of pertinent and relevant to sort of what we're discussing. And so that's what today's show is going to be about. And so when I do these solo shows like this, we are not often going to have mailbags. So today, for example, we won't do a mailbag at the end. I know there's a couple questions on there. I just may answer those just in case, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up. There won't be mailbags at the end of these. If you have super chats, I'll respond to the super chats. If they're related to the topic we're discussing, I'll bring them up during the show. If there are super chats, I will that aren't necessarily related to a specific topic or in response to them I already discussed, I'll bring those up at the end. But we're going to pick some different topics today, and I'm going to dive into a couple Notre Dame team related issues. Although one is technically sort of a recruiting issue, or not issue, but recruiting topic, and that's going to be Devin Ford. First part of the show, I'm going to talk about sort of the Notre Dame offense under Gerad Parker and really what I expect it to look like and what are some of the main differences between a Gerad Parker offense and a Tom Rees offense. I've gotten this question a few times this summer or this spring, really, and I got it again. I think it was yesterday or the day one of our shows last week. And I thought, it might be good to just kind of take a portion of a show and just really dive into some of the differences that I think we're going to see from this football team under Gerad Parker. It's not a discussion of who's better, who's worse. We don't know how good of a coordinator Gerad Parker is going to be. I've told you all I'm cautiously optimistic. I have some excitement about what I think he's going to bring. I think there's a lot of things that Tommy Rees did philosophically that I agreed with. That's more my style of play. There's some other things that maybe he didn't agree with that I like from Gerad Parker. And I'm sure as we get to know Gerad Parker more, there'll be some things that wouldn't necessarily be what I would do as a coordinator, but it fits what he does. So we're going to try to dive into what I think a Gerad Parker offense is going to look like, really based on what we've seen on film, what we've seen from practices, just talking to different people and getting into what we think that's going to look like. And then the last part of the show is going to be discussing Deion Sanders and what he's doing at Colorado. It seems like it's one of those topics where everybody is on a side, and it's either pro Deion, anti Deion. And I'm going to kind of dive into it and give sort of my opinion. There's some things about it that I like, some things about it I should say that I like. I understand, and other parts of it I don't necessarily like. And so I'm going to get into that at the end of the show as well. We're going to kick the show off, however, talking about the Notre Dame offense. And, it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of excitement about what this Notre Dame offense is going to be. And it's kind of funny and actually kind of interesting. And it's a point of view I tend to agree with to a certain aspect. But there seems to be in the Notre Dame universe, at least in the Irish Breakdown universe, whether it's our opinion, whether, the opinion of people that work with me and work for me, and then the opinion of you all, and we see in the chat, opinion on the message board. I see a lot of it on Twitter as well. That's why it's kind of the broader Notre Dame universe, because not everybody that I see commenting on Twitter or responding to me on Twitter is necessarily someone who is a part of the Irish Breakdown community. And so, when I look at this offense, I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I already see one just put in the chat about what Marcus Freeman wants on offense, ground and pound. I don't think that's really accurate either. There's a lot of excitement about the offense, even though the offense hasn't really been very good. in recent seasons, and honestly hasn't really been a dynamic offense since 2017, and hasn't been an overly efficient and dynamic offense since 2015. And there's been a lot of years since the beginning of the Brian Kelly era into the Marcus Freeman era where the offense is the part of the team that really held Notre Dame back. I mean, the exceptions obviously being the Brian Van Gorder tenure, where the defense was abysmal, and they actually had a pretty good offense in 2014, and the offense, or 2015. I thought the offense in 2013 at times was pretty good. The 2016 offense had some moments. It was very inconsistent, but it had some moments as well. The defense was just terrible all 3 years. So you kind of, I kind of chuckle at some of the excitement that we have, including myself, have about the offense, because the defense has been better, and the defense was better than the offense last year, significantly so. When you look at where it ranked related to other teams around the country, Notre Dame had a top 25 to 30 defense last year that, for the most part, with the exception of USC, played pretty well in the big games. I mean, defense played well against Ohio, played very well against Ohio State. They played great against Clemson. They played pretty well against Marshall. That last drive was brutal, the one that you gave up in the fourth quarter. But up until that point in time, they had only given up, 12, 14 points to Marshall. I thought they played well against North Carolina until the game was out of hand and they gave up a couple big plays. I thought they played well against BYU for the most part. So defense was clearly the best part of the team last year, but there's this concern about the defense and this excitement about the offense. I think part of it is the unknown that we have, and the excitement over the talent and all those kind of things. And I buy into all that. I think this is a very talented football team. I think that, the quarterback issues have been something we've discussed on the show quite a bit. And I'm rightfully on the same page with everybody else about the quarterback position. And so I think all those things factor into why there is an excitement about this football team. But what is the offense going to look like? I think that's a very fair question. When you break down, what this football team is going to be, and you say, okay, I know who the quarterback is going to be. I have a pretty good idea who the receivers are going to be in the rotation, who plays where and what. That's still to be determined. We kind of have an idea what the tight end rotation is going to look like. We know who's the starting running back. We know at least 3 of the 5 starting offensive linemen. I would argue 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen. There's a lot of personnel things. We have a pretty good idea. We know who's in the battle for the right guard position and those type of different aspects of it. But when we sit down and say, well, what's this offense going to look like? Well, I think I have a pretty good idea of what the offense is going to look like. And I've spent a lot of time over the last couple months trying to find the answers to this. And part of it was being at the practices and really studying what they did, trying to figure out some differences in practice, how they went about their practices. And there's some scheme things that are different, and we'll get into that. But this isn't going to be very much of a scheme specific type of conversation. This is going to be more of a conversation about structurally and schematically, and things that you can do when you pop on the film against Navy, or when you pop on the TV, I guess I should say, against Navy and Tennessee State and NC State and Central Michigan, Ohio State, on down the line. What are the things that you're going to look and say, oh, that's a little bit different, or maybe, boy, they're doing this more than they have in the past, or gee, that's that must be the Gerad Parker way of doing things. And so we're going to dive into that. I think it needs to start. I've thought different ways of how to kind of dive into these specifically. And I think the way I decided to start is I'm going to start with really more of what I think to be more of a bigger picture type of look at this offense. And I think the one thing that I'm most confident in I should say at least early on, the one thing I'm most confident about this offense is I do expect this to be a much more aggressive offense. And I think aggression means a lot of different things. And it's sometimes it's the obvious things. They're going to throw the ball downfield more. They're going to take more shots downfield. We saw some examples of this in the blue gold game. We saw a double post concept that Sam Hartman hit over the top to Jaden Thomas. I think we saw some concepts that didn't necessarily materialize, but some deeper route concepts. And of course, in practices, we just saw the one-on-ones to the outside that they threw to the outside. I think there's several reasons for this. Number one is obviously I think you have skill players that fit that. You have some big, tall receivers on the outside that can stretch the field, that you can win one-on-one contested routes. You've got some skill that's got some big playability. Talk about a Chris Tyree, a Tobias Merriweather. You've got a talented freshman class. You see them going after more dynamic receivers. The 23 class obviously has some guys that bring some big playability in different ways. Braylon James brings downfield speed. Jaden Greathouse brings some volume ability, but also a guy that's athletic enough to make plays down the field. Rico Flores, very similar. Caleb Smith's an after the catch kind of difference maker. Next year's class, Isaiah Canyon and Cam Williams are absolutely downfield vertical players. And so when you look at, okay, well, that they are clearly recruiting to that. When you look at the running backs the staff has recruited, Jeremiah Love, Aeneas Williams, Keedron Young is a guy that the staff is very high on. They're guys that bring some dual threat, big playability, especially Jeremiah Love in last year's class, if they're able to land Keedron Young. And I'm not saying that they're going to. I'm just saying I think that's a guy that I like a lot, that they like a lot, that, to me, is a guy that brings some ability out of the backfield, but more so is just a big-time home run threat as a running back. So they seem to be recruiting that kind of quarterback or that kind of player, a quarterback. They're recruiting guys that can flat out throw the ball down the field. I mean, that's the one thing a lot of the guys that they're recruiting have in common, whether it's Deuce Knight, whether it's KJ Lacey, George McIntyre, Blake Hebert. I mean, all the guys that we see this staff really focusing on, the one thing that almost all of them can do, especially the guys that are at the top of the board guys, they can all throw the ball down the field. I mean, they have not only the strong arms, but there's a lot more to throwing the ball down the field than just having a strong arm. They are talented downfield passers. So I think when you look at this team and you say the 23 team, well, yeah, they're going to throw the ball down the field because they have Sam Hartman. I would argue that that's partly why you get a Sam Hartman, is to throw the ball down the field. But you can't say that's directly going to be a change to this new offense because he committed to when Tommy Rees was still the coach. But I think what you're going to see under Gerad Parker is not only the downfield stuff, but the aggressiveness also comes from being able to attack, more concepts where you're designing routes to get guys free in big play opportunities. It's not always on a post or a go or a seam. Sometimes it's running clear out routes. You get a post from the outside guy and then a little clear out here, and then you bring a guy from the backside over the top. There's things like that you could do that are saying, hey, we're going to design this concept to get a guy freed down the field. That's all part of being aggressive. I think you're going to see part of the aggressiveness being, how they use formations, lining up in certain ways and using motions and shifts and, setting up other things with, jet sweeps and things like that may not seem like an aggressive concept, but it's being utilized in a way that they're trying to set you up, either catch you or set you up in something. When you look at the motions and shifts, they're designed, last year, a lot of the motions and shifts were designed to create, numbers advantages in the run game. And I think we'll still see that this year, but we didn't see as much, partly because of the personnel that they had. So it's not so much you didn't do it last year because there was a flaw in the system schematically or philosophically, but you didn't have the personnel for it. Where there wasn't as much motions and shifts and formations and personnel groupings that were designed to create big plays in the pass game or with any consistency. That's all part of it. It's also about then using other aspects of it to create more opportunities. And so some of the points that I'm going to go down here on are going to lead back into this number one point, which is a more aggressive game plan, a more aggressive, I should say, philosophy, not even game plan, but just philosophy, an attacking mode. I think this is an offensive staff, from the things that I've been able to learn, that I believe is one that wants to jump all over people. And if we're capable of beating somebody big, we want to beat them big. If we're capable of scoring 50 on a team, then we want to score 50 on a team, and not kind of play with people or say, hey, look, we think we have this team. We're much better than this team. We don't want to do anything to create mistakes that might let them get in the game. No, it's come out. We're going to do what we do. We're going to attack. We're going to go at you, and we're going to try to put the ball in the end zone every time we have it. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be 100 miles an hour all the time. But I do think point number two that I want to get to is I do think we're going to see some changes from a tempo standpoint. So when I talk about Notre Dame being more aggressive from a tempo standpoint, what I'm not referring to is that they're going to look like Chip Kelly 2010 Oregon. I'm not saying that. They're not going to come out every snap 100 miles an hour, go, 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 go. But what I do think we're going to see more of, and this is something that I've been a big advocate for in the past, is being willing to mix up your tempos throughout a game. You may come out one series and say, hey, we're going to kind of go with some tempo here, right? We want to go with some pace. And I think this is going to be sort of the default way of going about things, and that's playing with some pace. Now, pace is different than going fast. Pace means, hey, we get a play, let's get up there, let's get lined up, let's see what the defense is doing, let's get the call in, let's maybe even look to the sideline, get lined up, which I'm okay with when you're going with some tempo. But hey, we like the call. I think you might see this. I'm not getting this from anybody. This is just what teams that I think that I do believe do this will do. Maybe some two play call type of situations where, hey, we're going to run this play on the first play. If we hit it, then we're going to line up and we're going to run this play the next play. Just things that kind of allow you as a fan to be a little bit more aggressive in how you go out, with just playing with a little bit more pace. There's a little bit more rhythm, not so much, make your play, get in the huddle, go through the huddle, line up and get the call. We'll see some of that, especially after incompletions. And I think that's what I think we'll see a little bit of a difference is when you see success, they're going to go. If there's a stop, if there's a sack, if there's a incompletion, if there's something that doesn't necessarily go great, then you may see them, hey, let's huddle and let's get the right call in. So I think we'll see a little bit more pace. And then within that, I think there'll be times when they'll slow it down and go with more of a delay. Like, hey, look, we've gone fast. We scored 3 straight times. The defense has been on the field a lot. Let's maybe this series slow it down a little bit, right? Maybe we'll huddle a little bit, get more of the huddle call a little bit more. And then I think there's other times you're going to see them just come out and say, we're going to go fast. And whether you call it NASCAR, speed, whatever you're going to call it, where you're just going fast. And I think we'll see that mix up a lot more from Notre Dame this year. So I think just being more varied with the tempos, which keeps teams from really getting a read on how they're going to attack you from series to series. And I think part of that is going to play into and I want to include this with tempo, is I think part of that's going to say, hey, we're going to do a little bit more variety from a personnel grouping standpoint. I think this team was a little bit limited in its ability to do that the last couple of years. In 2021, I thought there was some injuries at tight end that made it to where they had to be a little bit more 11 dominant than maybe Tom Reese would have wanted to. This past year, there were some injuries and some departures that made them a little bit more 12 personnel dominant than I think Tom Reese would have wanted to be. I think as long as the personnel is healthy, I think this team would like to do a lot of mixing and matching with personnel from series to series. You're still going to see 13. You're still going to see 12. You're going to see some 11. You're going to see some 20. You're going to see some 21. I think we're going to see a lot more versatility from a personnel standpoint in this offense, not just because of the personnel changes, but also because I think that this is just something that is going to be a sort of a Gerad Parker staple in who he believes and what he believes in as a football team and as an offense. So number 3, let's get into some specifics of what they're going to be, what some of this is going to look like. So the first 2 were sort of big picture aspects of what the offense is going to look like. The next 3 are going to be a little bit specifics of what what is part of that going to look like. So I already talked about being more aggressive and some of the aspects of that play into what being more aggressive looks like, what it's going to mean, the tempo wise. Another big difference that we're going to see from this football team is you're going to see greater use of the RPO game. Now, what does that mean? That's twofold. So number 1 is you're just going to see, simply put, the RPO being utilized more in general. Last season, there were games where the RPO was hardly ever used. Other times, the RPO game was used a little bit more, or at least it was tagged more, but it wasn't utilized as much as it should have been. That could have been because the quarterback was not making the correct reads. It could have been because they were just smoke things. What I mean by that is, I'm just doing this to try to influence the defense. There's really not an option for the quarterback to pull it and throw it or pull it and run. It's just we're showing this to try to influence this defender because I don't think we can block them, or I think I'm trying to create a crease, or I'm trying to maybe set them up for something down the road. You'll have that, and you'll have that with this offense too. But I think we had a lot of that last year where even when they use RPOs, they weren't really using the RPOs. I think we're going to see a lot more of that from this football team in 2023. We saw it in the spring, obviously, so I'm not telling you something that you haven't seen with your own eyes. We saw it this spring. We saw a lot of RPO concepts this spring. We saw obviously Jared. I mean, I would argue that some of Jaden Greathouse's concept or catches were off RPOs. We saw, Sam Hartman doing a little bit of that slow mesh, which I don't want to see him do that as much. But I think what we will still see him do that some on some of the quicker game RPO stuff. I could see him still doing some of that where you're throwing a slant, a glance, one of those type of routes. I think the second part of the RPO game to me is going to be we're going to see more enhanced concepts out of the RPO. And there's basic stuff you can do out of the RPO that to me everyone should do. Hitch routes, speed outs, slides from the backfield, bubble screens, now screens. There's some basic things like that. Quick posts. There's some basic things like that. Speed outs from the outside that you can utilize that we saw Notre Dame utilize a lot in 2018. Those are basic RPO concepts that everybody can and should use, and I think we'll see those this year. And I like those. There's a lot to it. But if you're going to be a team that really majors in RPOs, and meaning it's a much greater part of your offense, you have to go beyond just the basic concepts. Those may make up 75, 80, 85% of what you do, but you have to have some enhancements to your RPO game. You just have to schematically. What does that mean? Well, glance routes have to be part of it. To me, there's a difference between a slant and a glance. A slant route is a very structured route concept where you're attacking leverage. You're going to break it off on this, or this based on how the defender is defending you. Glance routes can look like slants, but they're not slants because they can look like other things. They can almost look like bend routes. They can almost look like, almost sort of like an under, although not a ton. They can look like more in cuts, not so the sharp, 1-2 work inside, but just more the rounded off in cuts. Because the teaching is such that it's more of a get open kind of route than it is a, slant maybe, hey, third step, plant, go, right, and break off your route. It's a slant maybe, hey, if it's verse man, you press it to here. It's a very structured teaching concept for slants. Glance is it's structured in how you teach it, but it's not structured in how it's executed. And it's a concept that, I know Steve Sarkisian uses a lot. A lot of teams that major in the RPOs run this route concept a lot. And if you don't really know the intricacies of a glance route, you may not know that you may think, well, that was an in cut or that was a slant. I'm like, no, that was a glance. No, that was a glance too. It's going to look different. That's part of what you're going to see. And we saw this in the spring. But there's other things I think teams that really major in the RPOs can and should do. And that involves being more, actually running some pass concepts out of it. There may be some quick hitting perimeter type concepts. You could actually, I think there's merit to running, like I said, some outside post routes. I think there's merit to taking some one-on-one shots on go routes. And I think there's merit to running certain pass concepts out of it. And now I don't love running a ton of those. You'll see some of the air raid teams run a ton of these RPO concepts that are downfield. We're not seeing it as much as we used to because I think quarterbacks were taking a beating. But I think back to Jared Goff when he played under, I think Sonny Dykes was his head coach at the time. But he would run RPO concepts where they're throwing like downfield vertical routes. I mean, you're talking about like deep posts, corner routes, seam routes, where he's running RPO and then he's basically sitting and waiting. The problem with that is you're blocking for a run play, meaning you're not protecting the edge. And so Jared Goff took a lot of shots at Cal as he stoned the ball. And a lot of it was because it wasn't that his line wasn't blocking someone or someone got free on a pass rush. It was, we are not accounting for the edge per se on this run concept. Or we're not blocking for this delay linebacker because they're not blocking for pass, they're blocking for run, and that would expose him to getting some big hits. And so I don't want to see a lot of that. What I'm more referring to are some of the things that might be a little bit more rhythm downfield concepts. Things where you tell your quarterback, like, hey, if we're running, let's say we're in a 3-by-1. I won't get into specific routes, but let's say you're in a 3-by-1 with a tight end attached or a tight end in a wing position. Say we're going to run an inside zone and we're going to tag a backfield route concept. And it's kind of a vertical concept. Well, if you're running inside zone with your backside tight end accounting for that backside gap, then you have a 6 blocker. You can kind of protect off that edge a little bit. And so you might be able to kind of read that and then take that shot down the field, or even if it means give like a little bit of a flash because you've made your read. Because a lot of times with those downfield concepts, you might actually make a bit of a pre-snap read with some of those, but more so on the downfield routes, it's a post-snap read. A lot of the pre-snap RPO reads are going to come on the quick stuff. Hey, we've got this guy out leveraged. I'm pulling and throwing the bubble right now. I'm not even giving the flash fake. I am catching and I'm throwing the bubble. Because you'll see that in games, not so much Notre Dame, but you'll see that where other teams where, the quarterback's here, the running back is here, quarterback catches it, and the running back starts on an inside zone track, and the quarterback just turns and throws a now screen or turns and throws a bubble right now outside because or even a quick slide or a speed out or a hitch or something where he's just catching and throwing because he has read, hey, we have leverage here. This window's open. That corner's off with his hips turned. We can get this route out right now because we want to attack it, and you don't necessarily want to go through that fake. With the glance stuff, with slants, with quick posts, with some of the downfield concepts, you do still want to ride that out. Number one, to make your run and read, but number two, because that then will freeze guys and then open up some of those downfield opportunities on some of those route concepts. So that's all part of what I think we'll see when you look at Notre Dame's RPO package this year. It's not going to just be, hey, we're going to run more, 10 more. We're going to show 10 more. I think we're going to see a ton of RPO, and it's going to force teams into some really tough binds, which I think is going to I think early in the season will help the pass game. Later in the season is going to help the run game. What I mean by helping the pass game early is I think teams are going to play to stop the run early. I mean, if you're Navy, if you're Tennessee State, if you're NC State, you're probably saying, hey, we've got to stop Notre Dame from running the football. That's who they are. They've got two great tackles. They got a good center. Got some big mauling guards, perhaps. You're going to have a 230-pound monster running back. You've got good tight ends that can block. You're still going to have to stop the run. And you're going to force Notre Dame, because, yes, I know Notre Dame has Sam Hartman, but I would right now, I'll put it like this. If you're an opposing team right now and you're preparing for Notre Dame in game 1 or game 2 or game 3, because those teams are looking at Notre Dame right now, and you're watching Notre Dame play, even in the spring game, but you're watching Notre Dame play right now from last year. You're breaking down end of season film. Are you more concerned about the Notre Dame wide receivers, or are you more concerned about the combination of Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Zeke Correll, and Audric Estime? I would imagine you're more concerned with the offensive line / Audric Estime run game, correct? Hey, Tobias is talented, Deion's talented, Jaden's talented, but right now those guys aren't dudes. The tackles are dudes. The running back is a dude. I'm going to make those guys show me that they're ready to be big-time players. And until they do, you're going to see teams more focused on stopping the run early. And then later in the season, if they're able to have some success with the pass game, able to have some success with your RPO concepts, then all of a sudden that puts teams out more where they've got to play for width. They can't just fly their safeties down. They're going to be in situations where they may feel the need, hey, we have to play more kind of too high safety looks because they run a lot of play action. They run a lot of vertical concepts. They like to spread the field. They like to run flood concepts. So we have to be in a position where we can defend those from both ways, because if I'm running a flood concept to a 3-by-1 to the 3-by-1 side, and you roll down into a cover 1 or cover 3 look, you're going to have guys who can defend that. The alley player can help defend some of those concepts. The corner is going to be able to bail and cover the go route. The alley safety can kind of play the deep out, or he could even play the speed out, depending on how aggressive you want to be with him, wherever that's coming from. You have a guy that the linebacker, if he's a good cover guy, can play the out cut, or the safety could play the out cut, and the linebacker could buzz, depending on your coverage structure. There's some things you can do for that. But smart coaches also know how to run floods away from 3-by-1, and whether it's a sail concept or whatever. But there's a lot of things I would do schematically when I was a pass game coordinator. We'd go 3-by-1, but we'd end up basically running sort of a flood concept. It would look the same. It would just be getting there differently, where we'd run backside. So the backside receiver would run a go. One of the inside receivers is going to run a deep over, and then we're going to do some sort of delay under route where, again, we're attacking you on levels on the backside. If you're rolling away from that, then we're going to put you in some binds. If we're going 3-by-1 and you're rolling down and we're banging a lot of 1-on-1 backside routes because, or back to back, backside 2-on-1 concepts with our receiver and slides, we're bringing a lot of overs, a lot of crossers and things like that. And then we're running RPOs out of that stuff. it may say, hey, look, we got to play more two to the boundary, or which means we need to keep two high safety looks, or we need maybe playing four to the field, or whatever the case may be, with some of those different coverage structures. And now all of a sudden, you're going to have a tougher time getting the box numbers you need to defend the run game. And so that's what I look at and say that's how, or later in the season, if you're able to have success with the RPO game and the pass game, but more so focused on the RPO game, it's going to make your run game better. So I absolutely think this is something we're going to see a lot more of from the Notre Dame offense under Gerad Parker compared to what it was in past years. Number 4, I think that we're going to see, this is sort of a prediction. We didn't necessarily see it a ton in the spring. It's just knowing that the type of things that we already talked about, in order to make them work, I think you need an enhanced screen game. Being an effective RPO team, it's a great counter to run game. Like, why run screens? Okay, number 1, it's a great RPO add-on. Running screens, bubble screens, now screens, tunnel screens. There's a lot of different concepts that you can do off of RPO action. If you're in a 21 or 22 personnel, you can run bubble screens out of the backfield. You can run some perimeter screens to your running backs out of RPO concepts. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the screen game. It also helps protect against teams that are going to blitz you a lot. There's screen concepts that can help there. Teams that, if you are really good throwing the football and they do want to play two safeties back and you are able to get some good numbers, now all of a sudden your pass games, your I should say pass look screens come into play. Where you're dropping back and then all of a sudden, you're looking down the field and bam, we're knocking a little slip screen behind because you've dropped 8. And we're going to let that weak side defender come, weak side edge guy come. We're going to have that tailback just come slip around right behind, called a slip screen, slip right behind him. We're dumping it off, and now we've got a caravan of blockers in front of those because you dropped your backers and dropped your safeties into coverage. So all those things, I think we're going to see a lot more of sort of an enhanced screen game, inside and out screen game. And then the final piece to me is we're going to see a run game that schematically looks a lot like last year's, meaning most of the run concepts I believe we'll see this year are going to be things we saw last year. We're going to see duo. We're going to see inside zone. We're going to see outside zone. We're going to see different versions of counter. We're going to see jet sweeps. We're going to see things like that. We saw all that last year. There may be a couple wrinkles here and there that Joe Rudolph likes to add or will want to add that all O-line coaches do, but the bread and butter runs are going to look a lot like last year. But I think it's going to also look a lot different than last year. And here's the ways that I think it's going to look different. Number 1 is we're going to see a lot more, as I kind of already alluded to, or I didn't allude to, I said earlier, the more diversity of personnel, 11, 10, 21, 20, 22, 13, all those different concepts. If I think I said 12, if I didn't, 12. And so we'll see a lot of that. We'll see a lot of movement out of this, kind of like we saw last year, but a lot more diversity of how you line up, which creates can create problems for you as an offense, depending on what you're running, but it also puts defenses in a lot of bind. So depending on how you're gonna your scheme, your concept. So if I'm running a lot of 11 personnel, I have to attack with duo differently than I'm attacking with duo and 12 personnel. So I have to figure out ways to attack with that. And so then you look at, if I'm in 12 personnel, I'm getting more condensed boxes. What are some things I can do to make teams pay for that? I thought the Clemson game last year was an example of that. So, but I think we'll see that more consistently this year, is the diversity in which they align up and how they get into it. And the second part is schematic diversity and how the concepts are implemented. Meaning, yes, we're going to see inside zone. We're going to see counter. We're going to see duo. We're going to see outside zone. We're going to see those concepts. I think we even saw a couple tosses last year with pulling inside guys. And get into some of those type of things. And so this year, I think we'll see, some games duo may be a heavy usage of duo in some games. In other games, it may be duos not used as much. I think we'll see a more balance between duo and inside zone, where some of the games last year where I really felt like Notre Dame was at its best from a run game standpoint is games where they were really going after teams with a very different make it like inside run game balance, inside zone, duo, mixing it up, getting outside. And we just didn't see that a lot. I think we'll see that consistently this year. There will be games, obviously, when they're just going to hammer teams and say, hey, we've run this play and they just can't stop it. So we're going to keep going at it. But I think we're going to see more inside zone duo balance. I think we're going to see more of a perimeter run game usage this year, whether it's outside zone, whether it's a toss sweep type of play, jet sweeps, pure sweeps, with backs. Also, some counters getting into counters different ways, meaning so instead of, hey, we ran 40 run plays and 28 of them were duo and 5 of them were inside zone. We ran 3 jet sweeps and like 3 counters and then like 1 outside zone, which is similar to what we saw last year. I think this year we're going to see more. If there's 40 run plays, it's like 10 inside zones or duos, 10 of the other, more counters, more some of these, maybe solo lineman wrap type concepts, maybe that are kind of, I don't know if we'll see that. That's just what some teams will do, but more outside zone, more getting the ball outside, greater usage of some of the shovels and jets and things that they do. I think we'll see more of that this year. And I think that's the final piece to this run game to this offense is going to be a lot different. So more aggressive. That's going to include more variety of tempo. We're going to see a greater usage of the RPOs, an enhanced screen game, and then the last piece, which was a more diverse run game. So that's what I think we're going to see from the Notre Dame offense this year. I think those are the areas where when they come out, they're. I think we'll see it pretty early on. I could maybe see Navy not being the game where they're using that just because of how the triple option can kind of maybe cause you to alter what you do offensively. But I think we're going to see it pretty early on. We'll see those differences really start to shine and to where you're going to say to yourself, I'm not seeing a lot of new stuff, right? There's some pass game wrinkles that will be new, maybe a run game wrinkle here and there. But structurally, schematically, there's going to be a lot of carryover. But how it's used, how it's implemented, the volume of, hey, look, all the deep stuff that they have this year, they would have had last year, but they're going to use it way more this year, for example. I think that's going to be what is going to be the biggest difference between the Notre Dame offense in the past under Tommy Rees and other coaches and the Notre Dame offense under Gerad Parker. Next, I want to talk about the Devin Ford transfer and why Notre Dame might be doing this, what it might mean for Notre Dame, just to get into it. So just so you all understand, I was on my way to Ohio this weekend I think it was Friday is when the decision came down, and I'm driving down the road. I had gotten about 30 minutes down the road, and I knew something like this was going to happen. I should have been better prepared. And so I get an alert that Devyn Ford has announced he's going to transfer. Now, I didn't know that Devyn Ford was one of the guys Notre Dame was looking at. I didn't. I knew that they were looking at some running backs. I didn't know that he was going to be the guy that they were going to get. So I was caught off guard simply by him being the guy, but the timing of it, I wasn't aware he was going to be committing on Friday. So I had to pull over. I'm pulling over on the highway. This is on the 89 Turnpike, and I just got semis just barreling by me. I had to get out of the car, go get my computer, write up the story, get it out, and put it out there. And then obviously I was out of town all weekend, and so we haven't really had a chance to sit down and dive into this. And so I kind of want to dive into why they would go after Devyn Ford in the first place, sort of what he brings to the table for Notre Dame, what he adds to the table for Notre Dame, and just how he fits and those type of things and how it impacts the Notre Dame roster. So a little bit of background on Devyn Ford. Devyn Ford was a member of the 2019 recruiting class. He comes to Notre Dame with 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. I don't know if he'll use both of them, but it's he has a COVID year, meaning he played as a freshman in 19, played in 20. He got hurt in 20 and missed the second half of that season, but he played more than 4 games. He played in 2021, and then this year he played in 4 games and then chose to sit out and redshirt the remainder of the year. So that got him an extra year of eligibility. Again, I don't know if he's going to use it, but he's going to have it. So he does come with 2 years of eligibility, which is good because if Audric Estime leaves, if there's an injury, if there's somebody transfers or something like that, it gives you an extra guy that you can have next year if you need to, if he pans out and he's able to help you. So it gives you some protection. And then if you're good, or if he may decide to move on, but there's a lot of different ways that can go. But I think it was smart for Notre Dame to, and we've talked about this several times since Logan Diggs left. Notre Dame is okay if with the 4 backs they have, if everybody stays healthy. But it made sense for them to at least be open to portal options because, again, when you look at it, of that 4, you have Audric Estime, who's been healthy. He hasn't had any issues so far. But after him, you've got Jadarian Price just coming off an Achilles injury. And we all have this optimism about, hey, look, he's a guy that is talented and can be dynamic and be a number 1 back and was their best running back last year before the injury, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all that's true. I had Jadarian Price graded out as a top 100 player coming out of high school. And I believe if he was healthy last year, we'd be talking about him and Benjamin Morrison as being criminally underrated coming out of high school. I really believe that. But we can't assume that's going to be the case. And we can't assume that he's going to be that guy again because he didn't have a knee injury, he had an Achilles injury. And Achilles injuries are still a lot more shaky and questionable for guys. Some guys come back fine. Other guys come back and they're just not the same. They don't have the same explosiveness. They don't have the same cutting ability. So we really don't know. And again, this is a guy that didn't go through spring. So it would be unwise, in my opinion, to just assume he's going to be back to full speed and full health and be just his old self in September and October. I think it would be unwise to do that. If he is, great. I mean, great. But you can't assume it. So, okay, well, what else do you have on your depth chart? Well, you have Jabron Payne. Okay, cool. Jabron's a talented player. He was a guy that I graded as a 4-star top 250 caliber back coming out of high school, even with the injuries. He's a guy that I thought looked really good in the spring. He looked great in the practice we were at, or the two practices we were at, although the second practice they were more passing than running. But even then, I still liked what I saw from him, pass pro, catching the ball, and running. And then, of course, he looked good in the blue gold game. But again, we're talking about a guy that missed all but a half, I think, of his junior season and had 200 some rushing yards as a senior because he was banged up. And so we haven't seen him be a every down ball carrier since his sophomore year of high school. Could he end up being a really good player at Notre Dame? Absolutely. Can you assume he's going to be healthy and a good player at Notre Dame? No, you can't. Not if you're trying to really be honest about where you are as a football team. And then you say, okay, well, then you have Jeremiah Love. Big-time player, graded out as a top 50 recruit for me. Certainly a guy that I think can help Notre Dame as a freshman. But can he be a guy that comes in and can carry the ball 15-plus times against Ohio State and carry the load and have 20-plus touches, 15 carries, 15-plus carries, 5-plus receptions, pass block, and all that? That's asking a lot of a true freshman running back, especially one like him who is more of a slasher type of guy, who's 190 to 195 pounds. So you're going to see him play this year, but is he in a situation where you can assume he's going to come in and be that kind of guy, that he can be a Josh Adams type? When Josh came in, remember, he didn't play a ton early, came in for a carry here, carry there, was a big play guy, had a big play against UMass, came in against USC, had 1 carry for 26 yards. He ripped off a 26-yard game. We didn't see him again. Could Jeremiah Love be that? Absolutely. I anticipate him being that kind of back. Can he be a guy that once CJ Prosise went down, Josh Adams steps into the starting lineup and is now carrying the ball a lot more? That I don't know. That I have some questions about, because when you look at what Josh did that season, Josh ran for 800 yards, averaged 7 yards a carry. But in the last 5 games of the year, Josh had, actually, I'm going to go to total offense. So he had 20 touches, 17 touches, 13 touches, 18 touches, and 14 touches in those last 5 games of the season. That's a heavy workload. Can Jeremiah be that kind of guy? I don't know. Josh Adams is over 200 pounds as a freshman. He was, I think, over 210 pounds as a freshman. And so when you add all those up, you say, boy, there's a lot of talent at running back. And if everybody's healthy, you're good. But I don't know if going into the season with just 4 is really the way you want to be. But you say, well, hey, look, there's always the option of moving Chris Tyree back. Very true. But now you say, well, what are you doing to Chris Tyree at that point in time? You had him spend all this time transitioning to receiver, and then you're going to make him transition to running back because he had injury. So you land a guy like Devyn Ford, and you say, okay, well, he's got a little bit of a checkered injury history as well, although it wasn't the season-ending type of the really shake. Well, he did have a season-ending injury at Penn State, but it wasn't the same kind of, gee, I'm not sure if he's going to be the same guy anymore. He's not someone that's necessarily panned out to be the guy that he was as a top 100 back coming out of high school, but he's a good runner. He's got some skill that we'll dive into. And what I think he does is twofold. At the bare minimum, he does 2 things for you. The bare minimum. Number 1, he gives you insurance at running back, meaning he's a guy that comes in and say, you got a 5th guy that you've now increased your margin for error at running back. You now have a guy that can come in and carry the ball as a rotation guy, can catch the ball, can do a little pass pro, can do some different things for it, can do a lot of things that that you would have expected Chris Tyree to do without the speed, a little bit shiftier, but concept wise, the slasher type of stuff, he can do all that. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And so now you've got 4 guys competing for those 1 to 2 spots behind Audric Estime. You also have a veteran guy in the lineup too. This is your most experienced player, not from a touches standpoint, but from the aspect of years in the program, because he's now going into his 5th year. So I think bare minimum he does that. And then the second part of the bare minimum is by him being there, you now can ensure that you're going to leave Chris Tyree outside. I think kind of pulling him back and forth is not going to allow you to utilize him in the pass game the way that I think they want to utilize him. He would then become more of a niche player. And I think Notre Dame wants to be able to use Chris Tyree much more than as a niche player. I think they want him to be able to play a lot in the slot. And then that would allow, if him and Jay Greathouse can kind of say, hey, we are set there with them in the slot, then what you can do is you can still start Jaden Thomas there, but now you can play Jaden Thomas some in the boundary. You can play Jaden some as the field outside guy. So now it's the boundary guys, now the X. The former X, now the outside field guy, is now the Z, and the slot guy, which was the Z, is now the F. Just to remind you all about the new personnel names for that. But I think they would like to have Chris Tyree be more of a volume guy, opportunity wise, reps wise, to where yes, he rotates in with Jaden Thomas the slot, but also can play with him if you're going to move Jaden Thomas around as well. That enhances your screen game. It enhances your RPO game. It gives you a guy that can catch the ball, and if he gets a crease, he's going to go. And they don't have a lot of that at receiver, and Chris brings that. Now that you have Devin Ford, the Chris Tyree transition to wide receiver stays on track. You don't have to now cross-train him at both, make sure he's still up to speed with his responsibilities and blocking responsibilities and footwork as a runner and that kind of stuff. You just move forward, man. You just keep moving forward, this transitional wide receiver. So bare minimum, I think Devin Ford does that. But then there's the question of, well, can he be more than that? I mean, you're talking about a kid that Rivals ranked as the number 40 overall player in the country, is the number 1 running back in college football, in high school football in 2019. I didn't rank him that high. I'll be honest with you. I viewed him as more of a top 50 kind of guy coming out of high school. And you had ESPN ranked him at number 146, number 247 Sports ranked him at number 108. I think that to me is more in line with how I saw Devin Ford coming out of high school. I think when you look at it, was not a great running back class. If you go back and look at that class, and when I say he was the number 1 all-purpose running back coming out of high school, is what he was ranked by Rivals, because the number 1 overall running back was Trey Sanders, and I believe John Emery also ranked ahead of him. But that year they signed Noah Cain and Devin Ford. Noah Cain ranked 43rd, and Devin Ford ranked 4th. So he was the number 3 overall running back coming out, but the number 1 guy. It wasn't a great running back class. At least it hasn't panned out. Trey Sanders hasn't panned out. John Emery hasn't panned out because of injuries, both injuries. Noah Cain has been injured a lot. Zach Charbonnet ended up being pretty good. Austin Jones had a good year last year, but hasn't been great. Kenny McIntosh has just been okay. Isaiah Spiller didn't. I mean, he was good. I liked Isaiah Spiller at Texas A&M. Samson James didn't pan out. There's just been a lot of guys in that class that were expected to be really good players that haven't panned out, and he is one of those. Having said that, when you look at him and you break him down, you say, well, there were some things to like about him coming out of high school. There's no doubt about that. He was a guy that certainly brought a lot of big playability as a high school player. I thought he was more of a slasher that was quick than he was a burner. Like I never viewed him as like a Chris Tyree type of big play back, but I thought he was a guy that could help you, could make some plays, be dangerous with the ball in his hands, and he showed promise. I mean, first game of his career, I'm pulling it up right now. I think he had 100 yards in the first game of his career. Yes, as a true freshman in 2019. First game of the year, he against Idaho, he carries the ball 6 times for 107 yards. About a month later, he goes against Maryland, has 7 carries for 43 yards. Ends up having 38 yards against Indiana, 38 against Purdue. Ends the year with 294 yards. The next season comes out, he is battling for the starting job at Penn State. He ends up having 20 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown against Indiana. Goes for 8 for 36 against Ohio State, 9 for 36 against Maryland, 6 for 66 against Nebraska. Then he got hurt against Iowa and only carried the ball 3 times. Didn't play against Indiana or Michigan the next week. Comes back in December against Rutgers, goes 11 for 65, is injured again, and misses the rest of the year. In the 2 years since, he's had less than 100 yards of total. And so when you look at that, I think there's questions about, okay, where is he health-wise? Well, last year he chose to sit out, so it wasn't an injury situation. Played 1 game, had 7 carries for 37 yards against Auburn, and then they decided to sit him, and the young guys had passed him up, basically. So he jumps in a portal, and Notre Dame gets him. So then you say, okay, what can he bring to the table? And as I said earlier, the one thing I would say about Devin Ford is I think he brings a very similar role to what Chris Tyree did. Now, again, I'm not talking about similar style of play. I think they're different runners. I think Chris Tyree is a guy to me that I view as more of a home run threat. He's more of a one cut and go type of player. He is a put the foot in the ground, see the inside zone like he did against Syracuse, like he did against Clemson, hit that backside and take it to the house. Chris Tyree's never been a guy that you get in area in space and say, hey, go juke people, go make people miss. So their skill set is different. What I'm referring to is I think the way that you use them is similar, meaning, Devin is a slasher type of back. He's an inside-outside zone kind of guy. He's a guy that you can run on some counter concepts. He's a guy that you can utilize to make catches out of the backfield. And he's got pretty good hands, caught the ball well out of the backfield in high school. And he's a guy that isn't the biggest guy, 5'11", 195-ish, 200 pounds-ish, a guy that I think can be I won't say shifty, but shiftier type of back than really what you have at some other guys. A lot of your other guys, he's more similar to Jabron Payne in that regard. But he's a guy that I think brings some of the ability where he would fit pretty well in the Notre Dame offense. He would fit very well into inside zone, outside zone. He's a guy that can bounce a duo cut. He's a guy that can hit it upside. He's not a guy that you're going to use as a battering ram. If you're using him the way you used Chris Tyree last year, you're making the same mistake you made with Chris Tyree last year. If you use him like they used Chris Tyree in the past, inside zone, outside zone, counter, getting him outside, not getting him outside to let him attack the edge and use speed, because I don't think he's that type of burner type, but a guy that you're attacking outside with an outside zone where he can make a cut and then get a vertical insertion on an outside zone type of situation. So I think he brings a lot of that type of game to the table, which is how you should have used Chris Tyree schematically. I think he can play that role. And so I think in that regard, he can fit. Now, the question is what kind of production can he bring? And that, to me, is the biggest question mark with Devyn Ford, because it's just been so long since we've seen him be that kind of back. I mean, we haven't seen him really be featured at all since 2020. And so I think ideally, in a perfect world, he comes in early. Him and Jabron Payne are sort of that second and third back. I will be shocked if Jadarian Price is full go by August 26th. I just don't anticipate that. If he is, great. This is just my opinion. I don't think he'll be ready for that. And if he is healthy, I don't think you just want to throw him out there and say, hey, here's 10 touches, let's go. I think you want to build him up to where by the time you get to late September, October, and then, of course, November, now Jadearian's ready to go, and you've got those fresh legs ready to go at teams in October and November. That would be my hope, that he's ready to do that. If he's ready earlier, great, but I just don't anticipate it. So now you've got Gi'Bran Payne and you've got Devin Ford, that if Devin can simply just be what he was at Penn State, I'm not even going back to what he was in high school. If he can just be what he was in 19 and 20 at Penn State, you've got a good quality rotation back. You got a guy that will make good decisions, a guy that can run your slasher type of stuff, inside, outside zone, a guy that can come in and give you, 7 to 8 quality carries a game. And then you have, Gi'Bran Payne getting you 7 to 8 quality carries a game. And then, of course, you've got Audric Estime getting you 15 to 18 quality carry or high quality carries a game. So and he's also a kid that can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's got some experience in that regard too. So I think when I look at it, I think that's kind of the role that he can have for Notre Dame. And if he can be healthy and fill that role, then I think this is a good pickup. I do. I think it makes sense numbers wise. I think it gives you some insurance in case of injury. And I think he's a kid that fits their system. I do. And you're going into Virginia. He's a kid that's from Northern Virginia. It's another Virginia kid. If things work out well for him at Notre Dame, if they treat him good, which I anticipate they will, if he's able to have some success, get his master's degree and do all that kind of stuff, because I believe he's a graduate. He was at Penn State for 4 years. Then, of course, you're going to have created some great vibes back in Northern Virginia, where there's a lot of talent, state of Virginia now. When I was younger, most of the talent was in sort of the Tidewater, Hampton Roads area up to Richmond. There were some players from Northern Virginia, like Eddie Royal and Sean Glennon were from there. There were some guys from up that way. But most of the talent was in the southeastern part. Well, now it's very balanced, and you're getting even more Northern Virginia talent, like Notre Dame is seeing with Bodie Cahoon and guys like that, where Chris Tyree was more of a Richmond kid. So I think if you can go up there and have some success, that only helps you as well. So all in all, this is a good transfer pickup. I know that there were some rumblings that they were looking at King Doerue from Purdue, a kid that Notre Dame recruited out of high school. To me, I would much rather have Devyn Ford than King Doerue. King Doerue is going to do the same things Audric Estime can do, just not very well. He is an experienced guy that would bring you some physicality. What I like about Devyn Ford is Devyn brings a different style of play to what your starter is, which makes him a much better complementary player. So I think this pickup makes a lot of sense. I think it gives him good numbers. Him having 2 years of eligibility, if he and you both decide you want to use that and Audric goes pro or there's some injuries, you have some protection now for this year and potentially next year with a veteran player should the injury bug, or even if you have a lot of success and a guy like Audric Estime wants to go pro, you now have some protection. So I think those are all aspects that make me say, you know what? I really like this pickup. I think this makes a lot of sense. This isn't a needle moving pickup to where, hey, you're now going to be better than you were because you got this kid. What I think this help? No, it's not that, but it is you're not going to have as big of a, you're not going to be in as big a pain as you would be if you lose Audric, Jadearian's not healthy, and now you're trying to go at teams with just Gi'Bran and Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love. I don't love that idea. But if you're trying to go at teams, Audric gets hurt pray he doesn't, but if he gets hurt and Jadarian Price isn't back yet, and you've got to go into a game with Gi'Bran Payne and Jeremiah Love and Devin Ford, okay, you're going to be okay. With the offensive line you have, you're going to be okay. And that's why I like this pickup and why I think it was smart. And I'm glad this was the guy that they went and got. Of the backs on the board that they went after, this is one that you got, because he's also not someone who's going to scare people off. He's not going to be a guy like, oh, they got Devin Ford, I'm out of here, I'm not coming. I'm not going to take 2 backs in the 2024 class. I think those are some of the reasons why I think this is a good pickup for Notre Dame. All right. So just a reminder, before we dive into the final topic, we are not doing a mailbag right now at the end of the show. If you have something you want to get answered, you can send a super chat. I'm going to actually answer this super chat from Raymond Horton right now. before we dive into the final section of the show that's not necessarily Notre Dame section. So if you have something you want me to answer today, just throw a super chat in there. Otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow with a show, and we'll have our mail back tomorrow. But Raymond Harton with a super chat. Thank you, Raymond. He asked, good afternoon, Brian. Good afternoon, Raymond. Do you think Charles Jagusah has a chance to make an impact in the rotation this fall? Thanks. Raymond, we've talked a lot about Charles Jagusah, and that's it's an easy answer, but it's also not. It's an easy answer from the standpoint of simply looking at, does he have a chance to make an impact in the rotation this fall? Yes, he does. Absolutely. He's 6'6", he's 325, he's a good athlete, he's incredibly powerful, and he's incredibly talented. There's a couple things. Number one is he is coming off of a meniscus injury. I think MCL or meniscus, one of the two, not an ACL. It wasn't the major knee injury, but he did hurt his knee that required surgery. He'll be back by fall camp. He should be fine, meaning maybe he's not ready to go by August 26th, but he'll be able to be ready to go at some point in time. But he could also be ready by the time you get to the first week. He could be fine. The other part of it is he's still a bit of a raw offensive lineman. He didn't play in 2020 because of COVID. He stayed at his high school instead of transferring out to play somewhere else. So he missed that year of development. He was a pretty raw kid as a junior. I mean, he always had 5-star upside, but he was not a 5-star recruit as a junior. He was for me as a senior because he was dominant as a left tackle as a senior, and then he moved to left tackle. But he's still a pretty raw kid. And so I'm curious to see how quickly he can get caught up to speed in that regard. The second part of that, Raymond, is where does he make an impact? Is it at tackle? Is it at guard? Those are aspects that could factor into it as well. But does he have a chance to do so? Yes. If he doesn't make an impact as a freshman, am I concerned that maybe he's not as good as I thought he would be? No, not at all. Remember how many snaps Quentin Nelson played as a freshman? It's 0, right? Because now he would have played 4 games if they had that rule back then, but he didn't play as a freshman. Mike McGlinchey didn't play as a freshman. Ronnie Stanley barely played as a freshman. Liam Eichenberg didn't play as a freshman. There's been a lot of great offensive linemen in Notre Dame in the last 10, 15 years that didn't play as freshmen. It's a different position. I think he could do it, but I'm not guaranteeing it is where I'm at. If to speak specifically to Charles, I think he's got all the potential in the world, but he may need a little bit more time, a little bit more seasoning. But if he is able to crack the rotation this year, it's a good sign. It means he's ready to play. I would say it's more that than it would be necessarily that they're struggling at those other positions. That's kind of my 2 cents on that one. So thank you for your super chat, Raymond, and thank you for the question. Last thing I want to talk about, and just again, reminder, I'm not doing a mailbag today, right? So if you have a question you want to answer today, give me a super chat. Otherwise, because I see more people putting in mailbag questions. Not doing a mailbag today. We'll do one tomorrow for sure, but today we're not doing one. I'll only answer super chats today. Third topic I want to discuss today is a bit about Deion Sanders, and I want to look at this from the standpoint of not necessarily specifically about Deion, but also obviously Deion's the reason that we're going to talk about this topic that I want to kind of dive into. But Deion Sanders is getting a lot of flack around the country from some coaches about what he's doing with overhauling the Colorado roster. And basically, I think as of yesterday, Colorado had 50 transfers in their class, meaning 50 guys are going to be playing for them this year. We knew that they were going to bring in a lot of transfers, but it's getting crazy. I mean, 50 transfers they're bringing in. That's a lot of guys. And it's that combined with the fact that they're basically processing guys out. It's not even just if you had a lot of guys leave because they didn't want to play for you, or your roster was already small, or whatever the case may be, then sure, you're going to bring in 50. But this is more of he's processing guys out. And he's catching a lot of flack for it. And I'm going to read you some comments from Pat Narduzzi. And this is what he had to say. He's talking about what Deion's doing at Colorado. This is in an article on USA Today. He said, that's not the way it's meant to be. That's not what the rule intended to be. It's not to overhaul your roster. We'll see how it works out. But that, to me, looks bad on college football coaches across the country. the reflection is on one guy right now. But when you look at it overall, those kids that have moms and dads and brothers and sisters and goals in life, I don't know how many of those 70 that left really wanted to leave, or they were kicked in the butt to get out. And then he goes on to say, I grew up in a profession that you can't tell a guy that he has to leave based on athletic ability. When you become a head coach, you inherit that team and you coach that team. If someone wants to leave, that's great. You don't kick them out. I disagree with the whole process. That's not why I got in the game. I'm somewhat sympathetic to what Pat Narduzzi's saying there, but I think but I don't necessarily agree that I think he's taking his anger out on in the wrong direction. And I think Deion is a very easy lightning rod for a lot of this stuff. But I have a couple responses to this. Number one, I'm going to speak specifically to what he's talking about with Deion and what Deion has done. So look, Deion was hired at Colorado to do what? Win. Turn the program around and win. He inherited a team with a terrible roster. Not only did they not have great numbers, but more so, they just didn't have very good players. And there's this notion that you inherit the team you have and you coach them. Okay, you came into this game at an era where kids couldn't leave. You weren't going to force kids out because you couldn't rebuild your roster transfers because your kids would have to sit out a year. And so there wasn't this notion of when coach for 100 years, when kids, or I say 50 years, when you took over a new job, you had to build it differently because you couldn't go out and just get a bunch of transfers, and which means you couldn't kick people out. And so I understand where he's coming from, but you're talking about a world that doesn't exist anymore. And now we live in a world where coaches are doing this. Deion is doing it to a much greater degree than we've seen in the past. But how is this really any different other than a volume standpoint from what Lincoln Riley did last year? And that's kind of where I have a little bit of an issue with this is you're talking about this as like Deion's doing something that nobody else has done. I mean, Lincoln Riley brought in over 20 transfers last year. Why did he not turn over more? Because he didn't need to. Because he had still plenty of talented players on that football team. He inherited a much better roster than what Deion Sanders inherited. Do you all think that if Pat Narduzzi had the opportunity to I should say it this way, if he inherited the same roster that Deion inherited, that he wouldn't have brought in 10, 20 more transfers than he already did? Of course he would have. He brought in over 20 transfers his first year at USC. So what are you getting upset about now? Is it a volume thing? This is the world that you all created. So Deion was hired to do a job. His job is to win. Best way to win, get rid of all these kids that can't play. I don't like it. I really dislike it. I think it sucks. But at the same time, I would rather a coach, and he brought up like parents, I'd rather a coach tell me, son, you can't play for me and you're not in our plans. And so you need to go somewhere else. I would rather a coach tell me that than to basically lie to me because he has to deal with me. So he's going to tell me something that he doesn't believe to be true. And then I go in thinking I'm going to have a chance to compete, and then I'm not going to play for him. I would much rather say, hey, look, you're not a guy that can play for us. And then that can go find a home where they're going to want to play for him. From what I understand, Deion was honest with these people, and there's the video going around. I didn't like the presentation, but that's Deion being Deion. I don't like it, but he was honest, right? And I like honesty. And he said, most of you guys are not going to be here. And he told him that from day one. I don't particularly like the way Deion goes about his business. I don't like the it's all about me mentality that he has. I think it masks a lot of good that he does, but that's just who he is. But he's doing nothing illegal. So how can you get mad that he's doing something illegal? He's not lying to kids. Coaches lie to kids all the freaking time during recruiting, when they're there. Coaches are like some of the best liars on the planet. Let's be honest about that, okay? Let's get off our high horses. So if you're Pat Narduzzi and you're going to tell, I'm going to ask you, have you ever lied to a recruit? Have you ever misled a recruit? Have you ever exaggerated? Have you ever done anything like that? If you have, then shut up, because this is the process. You may not like it, but Deion was honest with these kids. You're not going to be here. You're not going to be here. We're going to bring in somebody else. And he did. These kids could have easily left when Deion got there. They could have. They wanted to stay and compete. They stayed and competed. He told them, you're not very good. You're not going to play here. We're going to bring in somebody else. You got to go. As far as I know, that's not illegal. There's nothing wrong with that. Do I like it? No, I don't like it. I can't stand it, actually. But it's the world we live in. And if you have a problem with it, instead of going after Deion, how about you go after the people like your president, your school president, your AD, your conference commissioners who've allowed this to happen? How about you go after them? Because what Deion has done is it's the rules. And his job, he was hired to win. And you don't win with the roster he inherited. So is he going to do a slow build? Why? When the rules are in place now for me to go out and do it this way. And I don't see anything different from what Deion is doing than what Lincoln Riley did last year, in that he is going to completely rebuild his roster through the transfer portal. The difference is Deion said, I don't have very good players, and so they're going to have to go, and I'm going to take over. Again, you can dislike how he did it, and I don't like how he did it. I don't particularly care for Deion's style. That's just not my style. I don't like it. It's not what I would want to play for, but he was honest with kids, and I wish more coaches would be honest. So if I have to choose, am I going to be more mad about a guy that processed kids out, or someone who at least was honest that he was going to do it this way? I'd rather focus on the fact that he was honest with those kids, and people can decide not to like it or whatever, but it's the rules. And if you don't like it, then how about you go after the people that created this rule? Go after the cowards that have sat there and allowed this to happen to the game. That's who you need to be mad about. Okay, go after the people that poached your roster. How about you be as loud against them as you are here? And so I don't have a lot of sympathy for Pat Narduzzi specifically, because I don't particularly care for Pat Narduzzi very much, but I am sympathetic to the notion of this is not how college football is supposed to be. And in that regard, he's 100% right. That's not how college football is supposed to be, but it's how college football is. And so I'm not going to get mad at a coach for taking advantage of the system in place to make that type of decision. That's the rules that you all have created, that you all have decided that you want, and then not nearly enough of you are pushing back on. The biggest voices that could have an impact in college football are the coaches. And they're either A, too cowardly to speak about it, or B, when they do speak about it, they say really stupid things. I don't like a lot of what Nick Saban is saying about this. Oh, let's unionize them. Let's turn them into pro players. That's very self-serving. That is not Nick Saban looking out for the game. That's Nick Saban looking out for Nick Saban, because Alabama would benefit from that far greater than anybody else. You've got Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri whining about how players are making more than his brother, who's a pediatrician who saves lives. Bro, you're a football coach that makes millions. How about you give up some of your money to your pediatrician brother who saves lives? Because you're not saving lives as a football coach, just like your players aren't saving lives because they're football players. And it's just this completely tone deaf or just self-serving things that these coaches are saying. Hugh Freeze coming out and talking about, hey, we're if they want to stop tampering, they need to do that. How about there be some integrity from coaches? Like, why are we saying they need to create rules to stop tampering? How about you say, hey, how about we have some freaking, some courage to say we're going to do things the right way? No, you're not going to do that. We know Hugh Freeze isn't going to do that. So that's the problem, is we have all these coaches that are giving these very self-serving answers to everything instead of saying, hey, no, this isn't right. This is not what we fought for. And this is what we believe should be. And so we're going to fight the system. The problem is they're not doing that. Like this desire for NCAA, they're going to do something really stupid, and it's going to really hurt the ability of players to get NIL money, and then that's going to create lawsuits, and it's just going to become this very problematic system as opposed to doing the right thing, saying NIL is a real thing. We're going to embrace that. But transfer portal, there's no reason for it to be like that. There's no reason for that to be like that. You can change that if you want. You just don't have the courage to do so. The schools don't have the courage to do so. The administration doesn't have the courage to do so. They don't have the courage to stand up and say, hey, look, playing college football is not a right. It's a privilege. And if you want to be part of it, we understand this is a billion-dollar industry now, and players deserve their share beyond just scholarship money and free gear. They deserve a piece of this pie. I don't necessarily love the idea of a revenue share. I like the idea of NIL. I like the idea of allowing collectives to do certain things. I would say streamline the collective process and let them say, hey, look, collectives are meant to be this. They can get schools up. They can pay players, but they have to pay everybody the same amount. And they cap it. I mean, you want to cap some of the collective stuff in that regard? Sure. And then let players get out, use their name, image, and likeness to get out on the market and say, hey, because I'm the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, I bring value to your business as a spokesperson, as an influencer, whatever, and that value equals this. I'm all for that. All for that. So there certainly need to be some changes. But what does NIL have to do with any of this? And I mean, what does the transfer portal have to do with any of this? You want to stop tampering, stop letting kids transfer right away. Simple as that. Simple as that. You want to stop Deion from doing this? Don't change a dang thing about NIL. Change the transfer rule. You cannot have kids come and play and transfer right away. Now create more exceptions than there have been before. I've talked about this a lot, right? If a coach leaves, if a head coach leaves, those kids have a window where they can jump in the portal and explore what's out there. There needs to be a window for that if a head coach leaves. If there's something along those lines, if there's a situation where, you and a school, neither one of you want to be together anymore, they don't want you, you want them, then there can be a mutual agreement that you both can say, hey, look, let's both sign this, and I go into the portal and play right away. There always need to be exceptions to it. But get rid of this mass portal process. Make very clear these are the 5, 6, 7, 8 things that can allow a kid to transfer and play right away. Change the process of, hey, look, you're going to go transfer here. You lose that. You can't play right away, but then don't make them lose a year of eligibility. If you stand good academic standing, you get that year back, so you still have 5 years to play. Because right now, if you redshirt as a freshman, under the old system, I should say, if you redshirt as a freshman or you have a medical injury as a freshman, and then you transfer after that year and you have to sit out the next year, you only have basically 3 years left, essentially, right? Because you've now lost that second year. And because you can't take it as another red shirt. And the way it was before, the only way you could get a medical red shirt is if you lost 2 full years. And I believe at one point it's like back-to-back, but it was at least 2 full years medical is the only way you could get a 6th year back in the day. So you can say, hey, look, you transfer, you sit out, stay in good academic standing, you're going to still have 4 years to play in that scenario. There's all types of things they could do to make sure that players are protected, that players are able to benefit off of the fact that they're a big part of. I think players think that they're more important to the game than they are. I've always believed that if college players decided we don't want to play anymore, that they left, and there's a lot of kids playing at the 1AA and Group of 5 and other levels that would love to come play for Notre Dame. And guess what? Fans are still going to go. They're still going to buy Notre Dame gear because they care about Notre Dame more so than they do you. You look at our business. When we write articles about former Notre Dame players on the site about this guy was named All-Pro or whatever, we got very little traction because for the most part, team fans stop caring about the college players on their team for the most part, unless they go to their own NFL team. Then they'll have their, hey, O-line look what Quentin Nelson's doing, but they don't really care that much. They don't follow them like they do. They don't have the same loyalty and passion once they leave. It's Notre Dame. And that's just the reality of it. But I think also people tend to downplay the importance that players have. So there needs to be that balance. I think coaches are much more important than the media is trying to portray coaches as being now. They're trying to act like coaches are no big deal. It's all about the players. That's also wrong. But I don't think coaches are as important as maybe we thought they were 50 years ago in regard to, how important they were in world and all this other kind of stuff. Like they could just, coach walks in and says this and people stop and do whatever. Okay, he's a football coach. But I think that there needs to be a lot of changes in regard to the structure of football in regard to how money is given out, and the players do deserve a greater piece of the pie, but not necessarily in a pure revenue sharing standpoint, but more so with certain deals. Let them sign deals. Like, look, if the SEC is signed with ESPN and they're going to get the TV revenue, that's fine. But if ESPN is going to use a player in the SEC as part of their advertising, then they should have contracts to where you can't use that kid's likeness in a commercial. You've got to pay that kid, right? And those are things that I think there should be a lot to do. If you're going to put a kid's jersey in your locker, in your store, that kid deserves a cut for that jersey. So there's a lot of things like that can be fixed that we can get into. But the fact of the matter is, this is the reality of college football right now. And for people to complain about Deion's doing this and Deion's doing that, you don't have to like it. I don't like it. But Deion's not the person I'm upset about. Deion is doing what the rules allow him to do. And why wouldn't he? Because he's doing it to do what? Why is Deion doing this? Is it because he gets his kicks off breaking kids' hearts and telling them to leave and he enjoys hurting kids? There's nothing in Deion's history since he got done playing the NFL that would make you at all think he doesn't care about young people. But he cares about Deion, and he cares about the job he was hired to do, and the job he was hired to do is win. And the kids at Colorado, for the most part, we're going to help him do that. The rules allow him to do what he's doing, and so he's doing it. I don't like it. I think it sucks. I don't think it's good for college football. I don't think it's not necessarily good for kids to a degree. Although, again, if you don't think I can play for you, then I'd rather you tell me that you don't think I can play for you. But at the same time, these are the rules. And so I just don't understand. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who are trying to make this a Deion problem. The only reason it's a Deion problem is because it's Deion. If it was any other coach that we didn't really know a lot about, if it was Carl Durrell, if it was Mike McIntyre, it wouldn't be the big thing that it is. Because, we'll see how it does. Don't think that's going to work for him, but we'll see how it does. But because it's Deion, it's a story. And I don't like that. And so I understand where Pat Narduzzi's coming from. I would just say you're raging against the wrong machine. And you fix that, and you stand up and have some courage and take on the people who are doing that, then I'll respect where you're coming from. If you're just trying to make this a Deion fight because you're in your feelings about what he's doing, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. If you're really that upset about it, how about I hear you have a little bit more stronger words and things like that for the people that have led us down this path of it being just the game being completely ruined in a lot of ways. And I think it is. I'm looking at these basketball teams, and kid teams are completely turning over rosters almost every year. Not by choice sometimes, because they're just kids are leaving. They can just leave whenever the heck they want. This is not good for the game. This is not professional sports either. And I don't even mean by, well, these are kids or not. No, you can't do this in professional sports. You can't just leave whenever you feelings are hurt in professional sports. You're under contract. And so it's a mess. And I hate the system. I hate the process. I just think when we're going at Deion, we're going at the wrong person. Deion is taking advantage of a broken system. He didn't break the system. He's using the system to accomplish what he was hired to do. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to like it. But don't take it out on him, because he's doing what any smart coach would do in this situation. I inherited a crap roster, and my job is to win and win now. Best way to do that, get rid of as many of these kids as I can and bring in as many talented players as I can. That's how you turn it around. And he's taking advantage of the system. If the system wasn't what it was today, Deion couldn't do it this way. And he'd probably still be at Jackson State. So that's my rant on that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that particular topic. Obviously, had a chance to talk a lot about Notre Dame. Beginning of the show, if you missed it, we talked a lot about what the offense is going to look like under Gerad Parker. And then we talked about Devyn Ford at running back. We'll be tonight, 6 o'clock. Obviously, IB Nation Sports Talk will be back. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm not quite sure who my co-host is going to be tomorrow. We'll have to find that one. We'll have to find that out. I'm still working on a couple things there. But we're going to have a lot of fun stuff to talk about tonight. Well, I think the midweek mailbag is tonight, I believe. And then tomorrow we'll have some more Notre Dame team topics. We'll do a little bit of a preview. I know one thing I'll talk about tomorrow is a bit of a preview of sort of the June visits that are coming up. It's a very, very important month of June for Notre Dame. It's a very important month of June for a lot of teams, but Notre Dame, obviously, we'll discuss a lot about that. Folks, if you haven't done so, do us a favor. Sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We have a lot of conversation going on there, a lot of things that we're working on, a lot of things that we're going to be adding to it over the summer. Obviously, we would love for you to be a part of that community. You can sign up for a monthly membership of $4.99 a month. You can sign up for an annual membership of $49.99 a year. If you're someone who says, hey, I want to support you guys beyond what you normally do, then what we have is a booster club at Irish Breakdown, which is when you go sign up, you can join the Shamrock, Blue, or Gold Club. It's different levels. You pay more beyond the membership. If you sign up for the Shamrock or the Blue Club, you get a free IB Club mug that only goes to IB Club members. If you sign up for the Gold Club, you actually get a mug and an IB. So it'll look a lot like this shirt with the IB, but underneath it, it'll say Gold Club on it. And that only goes to Gold Club members. I don't have one. My wife doesn't have one. Vince doesn't have one. Sean doesn't have one. Ryan doesn't have one. It's only for Gold Club members. It's just a thank you for your support of what we're doing at Irish Breakdown. So you can sign up for one of those as well. If you're currently a member and you want to support us beyond what you're doing, you can upgrade to one of those clubs as well and still be eligible for those special thank yous. So you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Hit that like button, everybody. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. We're starting to put more shows on Rumble if you want to check those out over there. But we got a lot of different things going on this summer. I'm very excited about the content plan we have coming out. So be ready for it. And thank you all so much for joining me today on the Irish Breakdown podcast.